Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I am here today at last to do my book haul for the month of December. I am filming this on January 4th, so I'm pretty late, but considering how busy the end of December was and the fact that I had to film a lot of videos in advance, so I would still have stuff to get to schedule during the week between Christmas and New Year's while I was in Pullman, Washington for an appointment for my buddy Guinness, who is asleep right here, and I'll talk more about that in my Friday Reads video for this week. But the point is, considering that I managed to schedule ahead videos for while I was gone, I'm okay with it. So I'm a little late for my December book haul, but here I am. Better late than never. And yes, my tree is still up. We're probably going to leave it up until maybe this weekend. And while it's here, I'm going to enjoy it and keep it in the frame. My channel, my rules. I got a lot of books in the month of December, which is kind of funny because starting in December, I started thinking about how much I probably need to, not probably, I really need to curb my spending on books. Not so much because of the spending, because I love supporting independent bookstores. I'm wearing a sweatshirt from an independent bookstore in Kansas right now that I hope to visit someday. But because I don't have a whole lot of room in my library and it's a space issue, and I keep bringing new books in and I haven't read a lot of the ones, it's something I'm kind of doing in my book haul revisits. And I'll put a link to my last book haul revisit in the description box as well. So I'm kind of learning about how I spend, but at the same time, I feel like I do a little bit too much. And it's really easy to get caught up. It's really easy to get excited. And that definitely happened to me this month because there's a lot to talk about. And since there's a lot to talk about, we are going to dive right in. And I'm going to try to do smaller book hauls in coming months. We'll see how that goes. Stay tuned for that. The first book I want to talk about is Fairyland, a memoir of my father by Alysia Abbott. This is something that I heard about on the New York Times Book Review podcast. At the end of every episode, the host, Pamela Paul, talks with one or two other people from the New York Times Book Review, and they talk about what they are currently reading. Someone was currently reading this, and I immediately wanted to order a copy. This is published by Norton. And it is a memoir about Alysia Abbott's life with her father and her childhood with him and how she grew up. Basically, I think her mother died and she is raised by her father. They moved to San Francisco. Her father starts dating both men and women, and they sort of move from apartment to apartment across the city. They don't really settle in one location. And then the AIDS epidemic hits and her father starts losing friends right and left. She decides she wants to strike out on her own and have a sort of more stable life. And then she gets a call from her father that he now has AIDS. And the memoir is about their relationship. I believe it has letters and things that he wrote in here. I'm kind of flipping through, and yes, you can see little notes that he sent and things like that. I think it's probably going to be emotionally devastating, but I am really looking forward to reading this book, hopefully sometime this year. Now, in all of my book hauls, I read a little bit of the opening of each book, and I'm going to do that for this one. Part 1, Fairy Tales. Chapter 1. Whenever my father described the 2-room apartment he shared with my mother on Peachtree Street, he told me about the fish. When they first moved in together, they had little money to decorate. Curiously stained oriental rugs and once proud antique dressers and end tables were picked up at estate sales and hauled home in the back of a borrowed pickup truck. What money they did have, a gift from my mom's parents, they put toward the tropical fish, which they bought in a single day of romantic enthusiasm. And that is the beginning of Fairyland by Alysia Abbott, something I'm really looking forward to. And if I don't get to it soon, because my reading in January is already booked up and I have a plan for February already. So if I don't get to it anytime soon, I'm thinking that this is going to go on my pile of possibilities for Pride Month. Say that 3 times fast. My pile of possibilities for Pride Month. It's not actually that hard to say 3 times fast. It's just alliteration. Come on, Greg. Get it together. Anyway, the next book is Oh Beautiful by Jung Yun, which does indeed have a beautiful, like staggeringly beautiful cover. This is published by St. Martin's Press, and it was recommended to me by Matthew Sharapa. He read it and loved it and thought that I might love it as well. And when I looked at the cover, I was immediately drawn in. But when I read the plot, I was sold pretty hard. So I ordered it immediately because I checked my library. They don't have it. I checked my subscription apps. None of them had it. So I figured ordering it was the only way to go, really. Well, now we're in a new year. And of course, the audiobook is on script, which is something I really need to do a little bit better at, leveraging these library and subscription apps. But I tried. It wasn't available in December when I ordered the book. And I'm really excited to have it because it is pretty. And the plot of the book sounds really fascinating. It is about a woman who returns to her hometown in North Dakota to write about the oil boom for a prestigious magazine. While she is there, she has to confront a lot of things, actually. She has to confront the way the town has changed, the way men look at her, the way the town treats her like a foreigner. She has to confront memories. Basically, it's about a woman reconciling her anger about the past and things that have leaked into the present, and her love for her home. I mean, I am sold so hard on that. Let's do the opening of the book. Chapter 1. Men talk to her on planes. She doesn't invite it anymore. It's just something that happens. Usually she travels with things to armor herself against unwanted conversation. Headphones, a sleeping mask, an oversized sweatshirt with a hood. But there was no time to pack today, only a few frantic minutes to throw clean clothes into a bag. She doesn't remember bringing the Restoril. She doesn't even remember having a prescription for Restoril. But thank God, she thinks. Thank God. Eleanor shakes a capsule loose and examines the strange combination of colors pinched between her fingers, half calming blue, half urgent red, with the words "for sleep" etched on the blue half. That is the opening of Oh Beautiful by Jung Yun, something I am really looking forward to reading. The next two books are recommendations that came from Jen the Librarian's channel, and if you don't follow Jen the Librarian, I definitely recommend you fix that because it's delightful. I ordered both of them from Gaze the Word, which is an independent, obviously gay, bookstore in the UK. I'm forgetting where. It's in London. Thank goodness it's on the back of these. So I've wanted to shop from them for a while, but if you try to order from their website, you get an error when you try to ship to the United States. So what I eventually found out by digging through their whole website was that you have to contact them directly at a different email address to place an order because they need to calculate what the shipping will be, and then you have to pay. It's a whole process. But I figured it out and I did it, and I'm really glad that I did because they were lovely throughout the whole process. I actually dealt with Jim, who is the owner of the store, and when he sent the books, he sent them with a postcard. A nice, lovely postcard that is personalized. Thanks for the order. We hope you enjoy the books. I've not read the Lavelle, but I have read Guapa twice and really enjoyed it. Best wishes, Jim. Does Amazon send personalized postcards? I don't think so. So really happy that I ordered from them. Not something that I'm going to be able to do a lot because the shipping was not cheap. So let's talk about the two books. The first one is Guapa by Saleem Haddad, and this is published by Europa. This is a debut novel set over a period of 24 hours. It's about Rasa, who is a gay man living in an unnamed Arab country. And in this 24-hour period, he is discovered with his lover by his grandmother, and his best friend, who is an activist and a drag queen, is arrested. Worried that he has lost the three people who are most important to him in the world, and I assume that means his lover, his grandmother, and his friend, Rasa wanders the city and has a series of encounters that force him to confront his sense of alienation in a society that may never grow to accept him, which sounds very profound, not very happy, but I'm really looking forward to reading this. And again, if I don't get to it anytime soon, this seems like a natural for my pile of possibilities for Pride Month, which is already looking really intense. I'm just excited for it. Because one other thing I really want to do in 2022, I don't really have a goal, but I want to get outside my comfort zone a little bit. And reading about the experience of a gay man in an Arab country is definitely outside my comfort zone. So chapter 1 is called Castrating Donkeys. That's interesting. The morning begins with shame. This is not new, but as memories of last night begin to sink in, the feeling takes on a terrifying resonance. I grimace, squirm, dig my fingers in my palms until the pain in my hands reflects how I feel. but there is no controlling what Teta saw, and her absence from my bedside means that she does not intend, as she had promised, to file away last night's mess in a deep corner of her mind. That is Guapa by Saleem Haddad. And by the way, thank you, Jen, for the recommendations. The other one is The Intoxicating Mr. Lavelle by Neil Blackmore. This is published by Windmill. This is a queer historical fiction novel. Do I need to say more? I do? Okay. Well, it's about brothers who are trying to make their way into high society and are finding that class boundaries are harder to overcome than they had anticipated. Things really take off when one of the brothers becomes, well, intoxicated with a man named Horace Lavelle, who is a little bit seductive and charming. And where it goes from there, I don't really know, but it is also described as a sort of talented Mr. Ripley-esque novel. So that's intriguing. And again, do I really need to say more? Let's do the opening of this book. Part 1, London, 1763. My mother was sure that in the future I would be a good person, or she was sure that I, or rather my brother Edgar and I, might meet good people and become their friends. My mother had a plan for our social advancement that was based on culture and erudition. All she had to do, she was sure, and my mother was always sure, was train us well in her twin holy tenets, Englishness and the Enlightenment. If we followed her plan, we could not fail. That is The Intoxicating Mr. Lavelle by Neil Blackmore. Now we move to a book called Somebody's Daughter, a memoir by Ashley C. Ford. This is published by Flatiron Books, and this was on the Washington Post's top 10 books of 2021. It was also in the New York Times 100 notable books of 2021. I will put links to both of my videos about those lists in the description box down below if you would like to check them out. So in this book, Ashley C. Ford grapples with how she grew up building a sort of one-sided and extremely emotional relationship with her father, who was absent during her entire childhood. He was in prison, and she did not know why at the time. It also deals with the experience of growing up as a Black woman in this country. So again, I am sold. All right, here we go. Chapter 1. Just remember, you can always come home. There it was. I expected and hated when my mother said those words. 2 years before this call, I'd moved to Brooklyn from Indiana. Now I lived in Flatbush with my boyfriend Kelly. Back home in the Midwest, our friends were building 4-bedroom houses on 1-acre lots with mortgages comparable to the monthly rent of our 1-bedroom. After living in the city for a year or two, I marveled at home features I would have called standard before I left. And that is the beginning of Somebody's Daughter, a memoir by Ashley C. Ford, another book I am looking forward to. Now, this is something I got without knowing anything about the book because I feel like the title and the subtitle pretty perfectly let you know what it's about. It's Tastemakers, 7 Immigrant Women Who Revolutionized Food in America by Mayukh Sen, published by Norton. And then after I ordered it from Book of the Month, I heard Mayukh Sen give an interview about the book on the New York Times Book Reviews podcast, and really that just kind of deepened my interest in the book. I am someone who is fascinated by immigrant stories, and I'm really interested in food politics and food memoirs and things like that. So the idea of getting into the American food politics and the ways in which they've been framed by immigrant stories, because if we're not native, we are immigrants in this country. It just seems like a natural fit for me, and I'm really interested in it. And let's do the opening of the book. The first section is about Chow Yang Buwei. It's called Mother Tongue. The words that began Chow Yang Buwei's Colossus, How to Cook and Eat in Chinese, 1945, still provoke and unsettle. I am ashamed to have written this book. And that is the opening of Tastemakers, 7 Immigrant Women Who Revolutionized Food in America by Mayukh Sen. Now I'm going to pivot. I have 2 other books that are not part of my Pulitzer Project, but I'm going to move and talk about some of those. So if you follow along on this channel, you know that I have set a project for myself to read every book that has won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. You also might remember, if you follow along, that I discovered the Franklin Library editions of Pulitzer Prize books. And I've been sort of keeping my eyes peeled to find affordable versions of these because they can sell at retailers online for $50 or more. But if you watch and wait, you can find cheaper versions, which are somewhere between $15 to $25, and then you tack on $3 to $5 shipping on top of that, and you got yourself a deal. I got a lot this past month. I ordered 4 from used book retailers. 1 has not arrived, so 3 did arrive, and then we went to a bookstore that happened to sell them. So I got another 3. Let's talk about them. Here is the pile. Aren't they pretty? I am just really in love with these editions of books. Now, I have to flip them over because I want to talk about them in publication order, and the oldest book is the one that was on the bottom of the pile. So thank you for bearing with me while I do that. The first one is Laughing Boy by Oliver LaFarge, and each book has a different cover design. So I'm going to kind of make sure you get the lay of the land on this, and it has a different spine design as well. The trim sizes are also different, which is a little annoying. You can see the difference in height between these 2 books, but I'm going to go with it. So I'm trying to focus on ones that are not available at my local library and that I would have to look for used anyway, and which are not available on subscription apps. So Laughing Boy is the oldest. This one is published in 1929, and Oliver LaFarge was one of the first people to attempt to portray the Native American experience in this country. And when I say portray it, I don't mean like Westerns where they are just kind of nameless, faceless villains. I mean, he actually wanted to portray what life was like for Native people in this country. And I confess, I'm nervous about how that's going to go because, again, this was published in 1929. So I don't know if this will have aged well, but I'm willing to go along with the ride, and I'm kind of fascinated to see how it goes. This is probably going to be one that I'm going to prioritize a little bit just to see how that actually shapes out. Now, at its heart, this is a love story about a silversmith whose name is Laughing Boy. He falls in love with a Navajo woman who was educated by Americans named Slim Girl. And that is one of the things that gives me pause, because the way the book's plot description goes is that Slim Girl is described as a quote, American educated girl. And I don't like that phrase because Native people are American and they, in fact, were here before us. So I'm going to get off my soapbox, but that is one of the things that gives me a little bit of concern about this. Now, let's look inside, because the illustrations are one of the things that's really appealing about this. You can see the gilt edges. Every one of them opens with a 2-page illustration. Look at how pretty that is. I don't want to open it too wide, but I think you get the sense of it. There are other illustrations throughout the book. I'll see if I can find some after I do the opening. Chapter 1. He was riding the 100 miles from Totokai to Tselani to attend a dance, or rather for the horse racing that would come afterward. The sun was hot and his belly was empty, but life moved in rhythm with his pony, loping steadily as an engine down the miles. That is the beginning of Laughing Boy by Oliver LaFarge. Let me see if I can find another illustration. Here's one. So I'm guessing that is Slim Girl in the chair. And let's do the next one, which is Lamb in His Bosom by Caroline Miller. This is probably, I think, the prettiest cover of all of them, because look at that detail. The spine is really pretty. I am just in love with these editions. Now, one of the interesting things about this Pulitzer winner is that on its Goodreads page, and by the way, this year I'm going to try to move away from Goodreads and to the Storygraph, but I used Goodreads as a crutch for this one. Please forgive me. On its Goodreads page, it is mentioned that Caroline Miller, who wrote this, is a Georgia author. She was the first Georgia author to win the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. And the success of this book and the fact that it won the Pulitzer Prize caused editor Harold Latham to seek out similar stories. So he published another Pulitzer Prize winner in 1937 by a Georgia author, Gone with the Wind. So in a way, you can blame Caroline Miller for Gone with the Wind. What's also interesting is that while Gone with the Wind focuses on the upper class society of Georgia during the Civil War, Lamb in His Bosom shines a light on the lower class people of Georgia, people who lived in the backwoods and who never owned a slave or planned to get involved in a war, but kind of got pulled along by the characters that you will find in Gone with the Wind. And again, I'm really nervous about how this book will have aged over time. The early Pulitzer Prizes were fascinated with the Civil War, and I've already done Gone with the Wind, and that didn't age well. I can tell you that for sure. So I don't know how the rest of them are going to go. Makes me nervous, but I'm willing to try. This is a Pulitzer Prize winner that I think a lot of people just really don't know about, and that makes it kind of interesting to me. The illustrations are just stunning. Again, I don't want to pull the book open too wide, which is going to be problematic when I try to read this, but just absolutely gorgeous. Let's do the beginning. Chapter 1. The name is Cean, and I assume that's pronounced like Sean, so that's what I'm going to do. Sean turned and lifted her hand briefly in farewell as she rode away beside Lonzo in the ox cart. Her mother and father and Jasper and Lias stood in front of the house watching her go. The old elder who had married Sean to Lonzo was in the house somewhere, leaving the members of the family to themselves in their leave-taking of Sean. But the youngest of the family, Jake, was not there. He had fled away, his thin face hard with grief. And let me see if I can find another illustration before we move on. Here is one right there. Beautiful illustrations in this book, as there are in all of them. Now, I forgot to mention, both of those and one of the others came from the Book People of Moscow, which is a bookstore in Moscow, Idaho, that Joel and I visited while we were down there. It's right next to Pullman, which is where Guinness's appointment was. It's on my bookstore map of the United States, and so I had to check it off on my list. So we went, and I was shocked to see that they have a shelf of Franklin Library Pulitzer Prize winners, so I picked 3 off because they were $25. Now, usually when I order these books from used book retailers online, once you factor in shipping, they get to be about $20 to $25, so that's right in the same wheelhouse. I didn't know this at the time, but those books were donated to Book People of Moscow, and the money goes into schools in the area, and I wish I had known that. I might have bought another one, but yes, credit to Book People of Moscow for having these in stock. Now let's move to the next one, which is Now in November by Josephine Johnson. This is one that I ordered from online. Again, pretty cover, not as elaborate as Lamb in His Bosom, but still very pretty. So this one was published the year after Lamb in His Bosom. And again, it's a little bit shorter. There's a height discrepancy here, and it's just going to be what it's going to be. I can't do anything about it. Now in November is about a white family that loses everything in the Depression and becomes dirt poor farmers, following them from when they arrive on their mortgaged farm across 10 years of droughts, fire, and anguish. And that sounds interesting as well. I think it's the first one that deals with the Depression, and it was published during the Depression, so that is interesting. This one, I think, is an early Franklin Library Pulitzer edition because the illustration style is a little bit different from the others, but it's still rather stunning, I think. Part 1, Prelude and Spring. Now in November, I can see our years as a whole. I love that. Right away, we have a title. Now in November, I can see our years as a whole. This autumn is like both an end and a beginning to our lives, and those days which seemed confused with the blur of all things too near and too familiar are clear and strange now. It has been a long year, longer and more full of meaning than all those 10 years that went before it. There were nights when I felt that we were moving toward some awful and hopeless hour, but when that hour came, it was broken up and confused because we were too near, and I did not even quite realize that it had come. And that is Now in November by Josephine Johnson. Let me see if I can find another illustration before we move on to the next one. Again, the illustration style is very different from the ones that have come before, but still very stunning, I think. That takes us to The Travels of Jaimie McPheeters by Robert Louis Taylor. This is the final book that I got from Book People of Moscow. And this, again, has a little bit of a more elaborate cover and spine. This is also different from the previous Pulitzer winners that I've talked about because it's more of an adventure story that would have been historical fiction even then, because it follows 13-year-old Jaimie McPheeters, who travels across America in 1849 with his father to participate in the California Gold Rush. This one was the Pulitzer winner for, I think, 1958. It says what year it won the Pulitzer in the beginning. Let me just confirm that. Yeah, Pulitzer Prize 1959, which means it was published in 1958. And here is the 2-page opening illustration, which is, again, just absolutely stunning. I feel like I've been saying that a lot. Chapter 1. On the day when I first learned of my father's journey, I had come back with 2 companions from a satisfactory afternoon in the weeds near Kay's Bell Foundry, shooting a slingshot at the new bells, which were lying out in the yard and strung up on rafters. Struck with rocks, they made a beautiful sound, although it seemed to upset Mr. William Kay, the proprietor. I didn't really realize this, but the print in this book is just a little bit tiny, so that's going to be interesting as well. I haven't quite considered how I'm going to read these books when I get around to it, because I want to make sure they stay in good condition. I washed my hands before I filmed this. All right, and 2 more Pulitzer Prize books. We get to Collected Stories of Jean Stafford right now. Again, just beautiful, beautiful books. So I'm going to read the blurb for this one to you. Jean Stafford communicates the small details of loneliness and connection, the search for freedom, and the desire to belong that not only illuminate whole lives, but also convey with an elegant economy of words the sense of the place and time in which our protagonists find themselves. Sold. I am a person who likes short stories, so I'm excited about this. And I love that the Pulitzer Prize is a prize that likes to go to short stories. And again, this one has sort of different illustrations. They're a little more fragmented than the others, but certainly no less appealing. This won the Pulitzer in 1970, which means it was published in 1969. So it's divided into sections: The Innocents Abroad, The Bostonians and Other Manifestations of the American Scene, Cowboys and Indians in Magic Mountains, and Manhattan Island. So I think each section is devoted to a specific place, but I haven't looked into it too closely. So part 1 is The Innocents Abroad, and the first story is Maggie Merriweather's Rich Experience. There was a hole so neat that it looked tailored in the dead center of the large, round, beige velours mat that had been thrown in the grass in the shade of the venerable sycamore, and through it protruded a clump of mint, so chic in its air of casualness, so piquant in its fragrance in the heat of mid-July, that Madame Floquet, a brisk Greek in middle life, suggested, speaking in French with a commandingly eccentric accent, that her host, Karl von Bobnoff, Mr. LeBaron, had contrived it all with shears and a trowel before his Sunday guests arrived at his manorial house, Magnamont, in Chantilly. That is a long sentence, and it has a lot of names and abbreviations for Madam, Monsieur, things like that. So I butchered that a little bit, but the writing itself seemed really good. So I'm looking forward to this. Let me find another illustration for you. So I just showed a picture and then realized that it has nudity, and not that I'm a prude, but I don't want YouTube to get upset with me. So here is a different illustration from the book. Whoops. Oh well. The final Pulitzer Prize winner, and then I have 2 more non-Pulitzer books, is Elbow Room by James Allen McPherson. This is another story collection and very pretty. I think these are, they almost look like strawberries, but I think they're leaves. Very pretty. So this, again, is another story collection, and it portrays the Black experience in this country with vibrant characters and what is described as haunting images and honesty. So I'm really looking forward to this as well. I'll show you the 2-page illustration. There you go. This was, I believe, the Pulitzer winner for 1978. So it was published in 77, which means that it's probably one of the last Franklin Library Pulitzer editions. All right, the first story is called Why I Like Country Music. And it begins, "No one will believe that I like country music. Even my wife scoffs when told such a possibility exists. Go on, Gloria tells me. I can see blues, bebop, maybe even a little buck dancing, but not bluegrass," Gloria says. "Hillbilly stuff is not just music. It's like the New York Stock Exchange. The minute you see a sharp rise in it, you better watch out." And that is the beginning of Elbow Room by James Allen McPherson. Let me find another. The final story in the collection is called Elbow Room, in fact. Let me find one more photo for you. Here it is. Another 2-page spread. There you go. For the story, A Loaf of Bread. Interesting. The second to last book in my December book haul needs no introduction. It's the 1619 Project, created by Nikole Hannah-Jones, winner of the Pulitzer Prize and the New York Times magazine. The 1619 project was originally done for New York Times Magazine, and it's turned into a whole thing that's expanded out, and its newest incarnation is as a book. There is also a children's book edition of it called, I think, Born on the Water. I was going to seek this out on audio, and then there have been so many attacks against Nikole Hannah-Jones because of this project that I felt like I really wanted to support the book, especially when a conservative person tweeted out that they should buy his book instead to try to push hers off of the New York Times bestseller list, to which I said, I'm going to buy a copy of this book. And Montana Book Company was getting signed versions in, so they got this for me. It's divided into sections. There is the signature, each dealing, so it's kind of expands on the original 1619 project. There are sections on origins, democracy, race, sugar, fear, dispossession, capitalism, politics, citizenship, self-defense, punishment, inheritance, and on and on and on. And each section has at least 2 items. There are poems and essays and all manner of things. So the first one is Origins. The preface is by Nikole Hannah-Jones. Let's just go with what she prefaces the book with. I was maybe 15 or 16 when I first came across the date 1619. Whenever I think about that moment, my mind conjures an image of glowing 3-dimensional numbers rising from the page. Of course, in reality, they were printed in plain black text on the cheap page of a paperback. Still, while the numbers did not literally glow, I remember sitting back in my chair and staring at the date, a bit confused, thrown off kilter by an exhilarating revelation starting to sink in. And that's the 1619 Project by Nikole Hannah-Jones and the New York Times Magazine. I'm glad to have it in my collection. And the final book in my December book haul is X by Sue Grafton, which, if you follow along, you know I'm recollecting all of my Sue Grafton books. By the way, I forgot to mention the publisher of the 1619 Project, which is One World. This edition of X is published by Putnam. So I'm recollecting all of my Sue Grafton paperbacks. X is one that I didn't read the first time. When she died, I went back to the beginning and started working my way through again. So I actually have never owned a copy of X until now. This means the only Sue Grafton book that I am missing is T, is for Trespass, and I'll get that. So there are actually 2 plot lines in this Kinsey Millhone adventure in which a seemingly simple task becomes very complicated and, of course, very dangerous. In the first one, Kinsey is hired to locate a son who was put up for adoption years ago, but then she needs to track down her client who paid her with marked bills and vanished. In the other storyline, the widow of a recently murdered PI asks Kinsey for help with an IRS audit, which sets Kinsey on the trail of an unhinged man when she discovers a coded list among the files, and that is X by Sue Grafton, part of my beloved Kinsey Millhone series. Chapter 1. Santa Teresa, California, Monday, March 6th, 1989. The state at large and the town of Santa Teresa in particular were nearing the midpoint of a drought that had slithered into view in 1986 and wouldn't slither off again until March of 1991, when the miracle rains arrived. Not that we dared anticipate relief at the time. From our perspective, the pitiless conditions were upon us with no end in sight. Local reservoirs had shrunk, leaving a wide swath of dried mud as cracked as an alligator's hide. And that is X by Sue Grafton. And those, I'm not going to attempt to pick this up, but those are the books that I brought into my library in the month of December. Far too many books. And like I said, I ordered another Franklin Library edition that just isn't here yet. So I have at least 1 book on the way for January, and 2 people gave me gift cards to Montana Book Company for the holidays, Joel and my sister. So I have more money to spend. I don't know that I'll spend it all in January, but we'll see how this all goes. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of these books. If you're interested in reading any of these books, if you think the Franklin Library editions are pretty, please let me know in the comment section down below. And if you have recommendations based on any of these, please let me know that in the comment section down below as well. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.